But
Thanks.
when the clients are here,
We're good?
just tell them that I'm running about 15 20 minutes
Great,
late.
started. Okay.
Yeah, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Ranajoy, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Susan.
Okay, and that's really good sound quality, so we're fine. So tell me, um, in today's world, it seems that there are a lot of people that think that it's important for organizations, whether they're for profit or not for profit, that they base themselves on a set of values that are understood to be somehow good in terms of their social impact. I can tell from the work that you do, I read your materials about impact investing. You really are knowledgeable in this area. How do you define a values-driven organization?
Thanks very much, Susan, and delighted to be speaking to you today. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, look, value for me is all about ultimate impact, whether it's to the end user of a product or it's to customers or if in my world of social impact finance, creating true impact, a positive impact to society. And instead of I'm using the term in very broad terms, it could be a population in a very vulnerable population in a very remote part of the world in an emerging country, or alternatively, it could also be in a developed jurisdiction as well. So it's all about creating true value and an aim through the impact or the whatever work or product that you're delivering to get to where you want to be. In terms of finance, it's getting that finance to where it's needed the most.
Okay, so what you've injected, though, is the idea that it is not just having an impact, it's having an impact for social good. Did I get that right? Because
Yeah.
you could be a very profit-driven company that doesn't care at all about social good. In fact, you could even be a negative impact. But you're talking about values-driven organizations somehow are connected to a social good. Let me just make sure that that's what you said.
Well, there are two really important points. That's correct, Susan. I mean, but there are two really important points in that question of yours. The first is the one of impact. So let me discuss that by way of an example. I was speaking once on a panel, and this gentleman who was a very senior executive in an auto manufacturing company said, it can be argued that anything we do as a corporate, as a business, delivers impact. He says in his case, it is a matter where his company produces cars, and he said it can be argued very, very strongly that the manufacturing of those cars creates a social impact, and he's right. How does it differ from, so, and you can argue that for almost any business if you think about it, that it has some impact. But how does social impact differ from a business that is creating or manufacturing or producing something which delivers an impact? And here lies the differentiation. In the social impact finance world, the repayment to the investors is closely linked to the actual measurement of the impact that you're making, which is not always the case in a business which is driven by making an impact anyway. So anything they do makes an impact. But in social impact finance or the performance-based impact finance world, the true impact is such a core element in a transaction or in a piece of work itself that it's almost difficult to separate the two from the payment element and the actual social impact, because they are closely linked with each other. The payment needs to be linked with an actual measure of the impact it's making. Now, to your second question, which is an even more intriguing question, is does having a corporate mindset or a profitable mindset, is it completely divorced, or are they separate from having a social impact or a positive impact attitude? And I don't think that they are that different. I mean, they very well can coexist, and they need to coexist. One of the big debates in the finance world today is with the big funds or fund investors coming in, and as part of the debate, one asks the question that if I'm a fund manager to my investors, by definition, my mandate is to maximize profits
Mm-hmm.
for my fund. Does that mean because I am profit driven, I no longer, I mean, it is sort of a different mission towards creating a social impact. And this is again where um, I'm not the only one, I would hope, who takes this view, but I'm sure that I mean, the majority of people out there also are beginning to come around to the idea that having a corporate mindset, a capitalistic mindset, or particularly from a private capital investor perspective, it does not mean that if you're profitable or if you're profit driven, you can't have a social impact towards what you do as well. And I would also argue that given the need of all the various crises around the world, and there's so many, I mean, you can talk about donation funding or philanthropy or grants. I mean, again, that source of funding goes a long way in addressing funding needs to when targeting different crises around the world. But the need for funding is so great that it will need to be complemented quite heavily by private capital investment towards targeting, various social issues around the world.
Well, this is very helpful, I think. I'm especially interested in your making an effort to define how this works in a profit-driven organization. Now, some of the thinking of, as you know, on a corporate level, just forgetting the equity business for a minute, but just on a corporate level, people have traditionally separated what they do for profit from what they do philanthropically. So they may have a company that makes widgets, they make a ton of money out of it, and then separately they have these sort of pet philanthropies to which they give money, which may or may not have anything to do with the company's core business. And I guess the thinking, which is very much like what you've just described, is that the real ticket, the real way to move towards the kind of world you're describing is when companies make it part of their core value business, so that whatever business they're in, at its heart, it should have the idea of creating social good with whatever it is it does. And I'm assuming from what you're telling me that that's consistent with what you're saying.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly right. And there has been a fundamental shift, I would say. I mean, being in London as well, and it's very much true for a number of clients and participants that we work with across the pond in the States and other parts of the world, where from a corporate perception angle or perspective, there's been a shift towards that the impact that you're delivering can be done even while you are in your as an institution, a profitable institution. But it does not mean that you need to necessarily change to a grant or a philanthropy or a donor based model. I mean,
Yes.
that's the big change that's available. Because, yes, there are questions about investors saying, I want to put in my 100 to making a to make my 100 is going towards delivering social impact through a particular project in, the term we use typically is called intervention, sort of in a particular intervention which targets a particular social issue. And it's absolutely reasonable for the investors to say, we would like to see and measure how our money is being used, and not just towards the project, but actually delivering a social impact. And there's a lot of research being done on that. There's a huge potential for that. But it's also opened up from a financing scale a huge amount of potential to back projects and issues around the world where funding is needed. And
So
yeah,
so
go on,
now
Susan.
so now here's a question that builds on that. Hold on one second, sorry. Um, a question that goes from there. We're talking about for-profit corporations at the moment, because I'm especially interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Is there any evidence that values-driven businesses defined the way we've just talked about it, that core to their business is the idea that whatever it is they do will have a social impact purpose of some kind. Is there any evidence that values-driven corporations are more profitable than others?
I'm not sure whether they are necessarily more profitable than others. It's a very good question. It's a very broad question at the same time. So let's take, for example, a particular product in the finance world. We talk about green bonds. Now, it's not proven that just because a financing arrangement, let's say a green bond, is being marketed as green, that it doesn't necessarily mean that the corporate issuing such green bonds necessarily get a higher return on it. But what it has shown is that there is a large appetite of people around the world, and it's extremely encouraging in the social impact space as well, where corporates which do have a core value of making a difference in society, which have a core value of having a shared impact approach towards the way they run their business, those corporates have a tremendous sense of goodwill, reputation, and also they tend to attract a much broader a much broader community of investors, both who are more traditionally capitalistic driven for profit, but also a large with a growing community of impact investors where they are looking to back that company not just for the business that they do, but also because they play a role in the society or the ecosystem in which they operate.
So, Ranajoy, do you have examples of that? The companies that you think, traditional corporations that you think are especially exemplary of that?
Yeah, in my world, a lot of these companies, there are the two types of companies that we normally come across in this space, which have been really successful. One is sort of a lot of the clients who we work with are sort of traditional banks or investment firms, and it's been very encouraging that a lot of these companies, like a lot of the city firms actually, like UBS, like Citi, like Barclays, and it's not just for investment in the UK. We are talking about social impact projects that they run right across the globe in various different jurisdictions. We've also seen companies which have been traditionally perceived to be big corporate money making giants. Let's take Coca-Cola for example, where they have run projects like the Cola Light project, which talks about converting bottles and transforming them into sort of solar lights, for example. I mean, there's a lot of innovation by these companies in doing what they do, but also translating what they do into making a social impact. And I think just a few of the ones which I named. I mean, UBS Optimus has done some fantastic work in the education of girls in a very remote part of India, for example. We were very intrinsically involved in the first cross-border development impact bond called Educate Girls, where UBS Optimus are funding the education of more than 20,000 children in a very remote part of India through funding an NGO called Educate Girls. And the first year results of it has shown itself that that you can have an approach where you combine what you do in terms of your mainstream investment, but it also has a layer of social impact, which is again wrapped into the transaction that you're putting together.
Yes, well, I know about that project, and it's truly impressive. When we were talking about whether companies can in fact be more profitable if they're values driven, and it seems as if that hasn't yet been determined with any real clarification. But one of the things that does strike me is if one feels, and a lot of people do, I think, that the real key to sustainability for a company is the kind of people that it attracts to work there, that the millennials who are looking for work in major and even small corporations now seem to have in their heads the one of the things that they want to check the box about is, does this company operate as a values driven business? Is that something you observe, and is it true in the law as well?
Absolutely. I mean, and this is, you mentioned the millennials, and I mean, it's such an important part of how corporates think of themselves sort of internally as well now. And we're seeing this through a number of mainstream clients that we work with, both companies, banks, investment firms in the city as well, where, I think there is a very, very strong sense of
Mm.
um, there's a rising consciousness within corporates at the moment to be very strong in terms of what is the messaging around the core values of the firm. I mean, in ways, I'm very lucky that we are in a firm where core values, the role that the firm as a law firm play as an international law firm plays in the communities is 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 given a massive amount of importance. I don't think we would have been able to launch our social impact finance practice was it not for the tremendous focus the firm has towards supporting the community and playing a role in it as well. As you mentioned, that one of the things is people identify with, they like to work in places, and this is sort of a broad generalization, in places where they can relate to values that are important for them.
So
Um,
this goes beyond the idea that young lawyers wanted to work for a firm that did great pro bono work. They might go out and build houses or work in a soup kitchen. This is talking again about what we said in the beginning, which is the core business, the core work that is done within a law firm. You're saying now much of that work is now itself um, tied around social impact. In fact, the stuff that you're talking about is primarily that.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right, Susan. I mean, and it's a very, very important distinction you made because, we have always, I mean, taking the example of our firm itself, I mean, we've always had, especially being a US law firm, we've always had a very, very strong culture of supporting pro bono projects and pro bono initiatives across our offices around the world. But to take an example of the social impact finance practice that we have, for example, we when we were setting this up, one, it fell squarely within our social values as a firm. But what we were very keen to do is not just do something on the side or do it in a way where we've got the day job and we're working with our usual traditional clients, and as and when these projects just pop up, we just dabble in them. We didn't want to dabble in it because it was something that the messaging around it was, and I was very, very supported by senior management here as well, where we wanted to set it up as a practice because we as lawyers, um, in my case it's as a financial lawyer, we are trained in a particular type of finance, to engineer, to work with banks or investment firms to put together or structure these transactions together. I mean, that's our key skill, and documenting them and looking at the regulations, looking
Mhm.
at the different legal landscapes available, and the issues that you face when you're dealing with cross-border transactions. I mean, that's what we do in our day-to-day lives anyway. To be able to lift that skill and to be able to apply that towards projects which target social impact, that's where we felt. And it's funny, when you say it, when you think about it, you think, oh, it's actually a no-brainer. A tax advisor or a tax lawyer would be doing that anyway as part of his business, and that's so true. But to be able to take the next step forward, and because as part of the overall value, by you saying your value proposition is that you want to be doing that as not just something on the side, but it's so easily done as a whole scale practice. And we've seen that the biggest transformation for us in terms of the impact finance practice is two things. One is how quickly it's grown. And internally, it's amazing. We've got a massively committed team, but also how enthusiastic people are um, to contribute with their skills, whether it's tax, whether it's regulatory, whether it's corporate, in my case, it's finance, to be able to apply their skills because they know at the end of the day they are seeing and they're working on a project which creates social impact.
So you're saying that actually within the firm, it has influence in the fact that people want to be part of that. They want to be able to wake up in the morning and say, "Gosh, I'm doing more than simply the practice of law that I was trained to do. I'm helping change the world." In a,
Yeah. Short of that, I mean, we'd really like to say that, but I'd say, short of that, it's a really inspiring feeling when you see that you've been part of some of these transactions, thanks to people who actually think about these transactions, and thanks to the people, those NGOs which actually do the hard work on the ground. But to be able to say that we were in some way able, in the skills, in the limited skills that we possess, able to assist in that process which ultimately delivers that impact, is, I think, one of the biggest inspiring things for the team and personally me as well. I mean, the other thing is that apart from the team that's grown internally as a result of treating this as a separate practice and being able to deliver social impact, what's been a great opportunity for us is the number of clients that have come through and said, oh, we've been looking at structuring something like this. And this is not just NGOs, this is not just charitable foundations. The big change is that these are corporates who you would not normally associate with a social impact outlook, to say, we want to do this as well in a country where we're trying to make an impact, or they are very, very attracted to a particular cause, building hospitals, clean water, education of children. I mean, these are huge issues around the world, but to see that clients are coming forward and helping is fantastic.
So, Ranajoy, it sounds as if when you look at the title of what we're talking about, do values still matter now? It sounds like in some fashion, even though we seem to have evidence in some quarters that there are people that are really sort of neglecting the social good values, that there's something very heartening about finding that traditional corporations, certainly your client base, are saying, we want more of this stuff. We want to really be involved, and we think it's not just so that we can, feel good about it, but that we can actually have an impact that will make us ultimately a better company. I mean, that sounds very blue sky, but it sounds like that's exactly what you're saying.
Well, I think the big change is, there's been a lot of, one has to really sort of separate the wood from the trees in this, because usually there's a lot of noise around and a lot of marketing around what is green, what is social impact, what is true impact. I mean, how do you measure it? How do you value it? How do you price it? And there's sort of large debates around it. I mean, if you're looking at a profit-driven institution which is looking at social impact, is that some sort of mission drift? And you can debate this either way. I mean, I am from the school of thought that the two doesn't necessarily need to be divorced. They can coexist. And what we're seeing is that these corporates, this is also the trend at the moment. I mean, there's a big rise in the corporate world to participate and be more involved. I don't know whether it is a result of post financial crisis, or where institutions have become more conscious of getting closer to the communities within which they operate. The jury's still out on that, but it's always encouraging to see when these institutions do come forward to put together solutions. That's the main thing. I mean, you can debate this till the sun goes down, but the question is, on the ground, in reality, are you seeing these institutions coming forward to put together solutions which targets social issues, which targets social impact? And in our experience, it has been, and it is growing. It is growing in both the traditional sense of financing. It is also growing in terms of sheer innovation in the ways these corporates are thinking about delivering what they do in more effective ways in places around the world where it's been difficult. I mean, if you look at the auto industry, for example, there's a big drive towards having eco-friendly cars. Now, one can argue that, oh, that's just a profitable gimmick, and it's going by the trend. There is a trend, absolutely, but if the trend means that you have more eco-friendly, socially responsible companies, then that's a good thing, right?
Then bravo, right.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you, that Ranajoy, that you'd like to add to this conversation? Do values matter now? Is there anything else that comes to mind that you think should be included?
No, I think your questions have been very thought provoking, and all of which can actually spark a debate. And but from my perspective, I think values do matter. It always has. I mean, I think it's not just it's not a now thing. I mean, I think there isn't anyone out there, or it isn't. I mean, I don't know who can put their hand on their heart and say, okay, we run our business and values don't matter. The question is, how do they matter, and how do you demonstrate that they really matter? And I think what we are seeing is that there's a lot of innovation in demonstrating that they matter through doing what they do already, even if that means that they are a profitable business. And to argue that just because they are profitable, they are in any way should be, they should be any less valued is not necessary.
Well, that's that. I think that's a good place to stop, and I think we'll. I really appreciate your participating, Ranajoy, and thank you very much for being part of this Reed Smith podcast.
I'm delighted. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So we're gonna get you just about on time to your meeting. This was great, Ranajoy. You were terrific.
Thanks very much.
And by the way, if you think of something else, you get this brainstorm in the middle of the night that you think, geez, we should really make sure we say this, just shoot me an email and we can always slip something else in.
Sure. I mean, when you play it back, it was a bit rushed today, but if you think that I need to sort of slip in any more, real examples of any points that you want elucidated a little more, or if there are any points that you want explained a bit further in terms of either the way we are doing it or what we're seeing. I mean, there were a couple of questions around examples as well, but if you think that there's anything is sort of slightly thin and you want it to be fleshed out, just let me know. I'd be happy to sort of participate.
In that case, I will be back. Thanks very much.
Excellent.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you all. Bye.
Now.